Welcome everyone. We are going to start the webinar shortly. Participants are muted upon entry, but we will keep monitoring the chat room for any technical or presentation related questions. The reminder email we sent out contained some tips about how to call in. Check your sound system and computer audio if you are using your computer to listen in. Depending on the volume of the questions, we might not have time to address all of your questions, but we will try all our best. Nick is monitoring our chat box. There are 200 people of you on the call. We have incorporated your questions as we prepared the slides. Thank you for taking the time to register and share your interest with us. My name is Asli Ashkir. I'm a Somali native. I'm a senior public health nurse consultant, and I've been working for Minnesota Department of Health, Children and Youth with Special Health Needs section for the last 4 years. My primary focus area is autism in the Somali community. I work with all families, including those rearing kids with autism, to help them understand autism, the importance of recognizing autism early, and the importance of connecting the kids to the existing services as soon as possible. I also train care providers that serve the Somali community on the Somali culture and how to work effectively with the Somali families. I would like to welcome my co-presenter and collaborator, Anab Goulet, to introduce herself.
Thank you, Asli. I will tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a project coordinator at the University of Minnesota's Institute in Community Integration, a federally designated university center for excellence in developmental disabilities. My background is public health, health policy, and community building. I have more than 20 years of experience serving diverse and underserved populations, including Somali community and individuals living with disabilities. The Institute in Community Integration is home to 70 plus projects and 6 affiliated centers addressing disability issues across lifespan. We do research, training, and outreach activities, and that's what I do through a variety of state and federally funded projects. Generally, I work in the area of ASD and early intervention and community living. With Minnesota Autism and Developmental Disability Monitors Network, that's the Autism Project, I'm the Outreach, Communications, and Community Engagement Coordinator. I conduct a number of activities with the goal of empowering diverse and immigrant families and children and strengthening practitioners' capacity to serve, provide cultural competence support and services. I've also played a similar role in the previously completed research project. We will not be able to do this work without the collaboration of our state and other affiliated centers, including community members and parents, both locally and nationally. And this webinar is testimony of that. I'm going to welcome Asli back to talk to you a little bit about our project objectives.
So we have 3 webinar objectives, which all of you have seen before. I will just quickly go over it. The first one is to provide you an overview of autism spectrum disorder and the Somali community. The second objective is to help you learn how to engage parents and other caregivers in early identification and autism intervention. And the last or the third one is to share free resources available in diverse languages. This slide is just to set the stage. It contains information you already know. ASD, as you all know, is a complex developmental disability that can cause significant social, communication, and behavioral challenges. There are likely many causes for multiple types of autism, including environmental, biological, and genetic factors. Most children with ASD are still not diagnosed until age 4.5 years in the United States, even though ASD can be diagnosed as early as 2 years age. Hence, many children do not receive the services that they need until later age of their lives, and this is more common among children of diverse communities. A diagnosis of ASD now includes several conditions that used to be diagnosed separately: autistic disorder, pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified, and Asperger syndrome. A number of children with ASD has risen recently, but it is showing some potential signs of stability. One in every 68 kids in the US are diagnosed with autism. And this stability we are seeing since 2010 and 2012. Anub and I are going to be a tag team, and now I will transfer the microphone to her.
Thank you, Asli. I would like to talk to you a little bit about ASD and the Somali community, give you some historical perspective of some key significant timelines or events. It dates back around 10 years ago, a decade ago, around summer of 2008, when Somali parents and others in Minneapolis School District were concerned about ASD in the Somali community. The TV and the print media reported the Somali community concerns, and primarily they were concerned the increased numbers of Somali children with autism in Minneapolis special education program for ASD. The picture that you see of the little boy is from a story that was featured in MinPost in 2008, and the title was Mysterious Connection, Autism, and the Minneapolis Somali Children. As this story was growing and Somali parents and others in Minneapolis were expressing their concerns, that concern went to Minnesota Department of Health, and they looked into what appeared to be more Somali children enrolled in the Minneapolis Public Schools Special Education Program for ASD in comparison to overall children of Somali children enrolled in the city's public schools. The Minnesota Department of Health shared the community's concern and examined by conducting an administrative data study and looked at the preschool age children enrolled in the program. The study reviewed the records of Minneapolis Public Schools to see if the concern was legitimate. The administrative prevalence ratio ranged from approximately 2 to 7 times higher for Somali children ages 3 to 4 relative to non-Somali children. That gap decreased as the children got older. This Somali community concern about autism continued. The professionals and educators and clinician concerns continued. And there was a compelling advocacy at the IAC meeting. This is the Interagency Autism Coordinating Committee. It's a federally advisory committee that coordinates all efforts within the Department of Health and Human Services. And the concerns about autism spectrum disorder about the Somali community was presented by a Somali parent to the committee. Several IAC member agency organizations, the Centers for Disease Control Prevention, Autism Speaks, and 4 institutes from the National Institute of Health, NIH, identified a research that could be expanded to investigate this reported cluster of ASD. That led to the University of Minnesota conducting the Minneapolis Somali ASD prevalence study in 2011. Its report was completed in 2013. We will briefly discuss the findings of that study, but I want to also highlight another thing that's also you can see in this PowerPoint, which is the date 2015. That's when University of Minnesota again became part of the ADDM network. That's the MinADDM project that's right now ongoing. It's a multi-source public health surveillance project that's monitoring the prevalence of autism spectrum disorder and intellectual disability in 8 years old children within Hennepin and Ramsey County. And the difference in this MinADDM is that now we are part of the ADDM CDC ADDM network. We are part of the states that are going to inform the overall data of ASD nationwide. We will also learn a lot more about particular populations like the Somali and the Hmong. We will be collecting information from larger geographical data, and the expected findings will be sometime in 2018. The slide you see here shows one of our cover pages in the community reports that we've done to report our community engagement activities and also some of our project findings. I've mentioned earlier that I will be sharing with you some highlights about the Minneapolis Somali ASD Prevalence Project. This is one of the slides that I like to go over with you. The main research question for this study was to look if there is a higher prevalence of ASD in Somalis versus non-Somali children who live in Minneapolis. That was our research study question. The project estimated ASD population prevalence for children 8 through 9 with at least one parent resident of Minneapolis in 2010. Compared ASD prevalence by subgroups to assess the difference in population prevalence. So what you're looking at is you're looking at our overall prevalence, 1 in 48, that was the finding, but you're also looking at specific information about the Somali community, that's 1 in 32. We also looked at white as a race, and we found that was 1 in 36. Black, overall Black, minus the Somalis, that was 1 in 62. We looked at Hispanic. The research question was later on expanded to include, based on the community input, to look into the intellectual disability. But for the purpose of today's webinar, we just wanted to share with you some of the key highlights. I wanted to mention that the Somali data and the white data are not statistically significantly different. So our overall findings, again, was that Somali and whites were about equally to be identified with ASD in Minneapolis, and that the Somali and white children were more likely to be identified with ASD than a Black Hispanic children in Minneapolis. It's unknown why Somali and white children were more likely to be identified with ASD than Black and Hispanic children. The project was not designed to answer such questions. The number of Native American and Asian children were so low that in this project, that meaningful conclusion could not be drawn about these children. Males were more likely to be identified in ASD than females in all racial and ethnic groups in Minneapolis. This is consistent with the national data from CDC that was reported consistently that more boys have ASD than girls. In some ways, the findings of this study quantified what the community suspected, that they had a concern of Somali children having, in Minneapolis, having more ASD. It meant that that we had an opportunity to learn about what that prevalence looked like, and we will have an opportunity to learn more from our mean data since our geographical data is bigger. The study limitations were not included in causation, and it's not a representation of all Somali community across the country or across the nation. It was a small prevalence study based in Minneapolis population. So I wanted to highlight that so people don't draw a bigger conclusion from this data. We had 3 key findings in this study: prevalence, ID, and age of diagnosis. So in this slide, what you see is children with ASD who were identified also having an ID or intellectual disability. Even though the prevalence number made sense to the community, the co-occurring disability of ID was something that was new and added complexity to the issue, specifically cultural concerns associated with that. So as you can see, the overall was 33%. And when you look at the Somali children, percentage of children with ID who had the co-occurring ID, you can see it's 100%. And that's not the case for white, Black, or Hispanic. So that was something that was of a concern, and it's something that came out from the study based on the kids who had their IQ scored. So we know that the prevalence numbers made sense, but that the co-occurrence is something that needs to be looked into. There are a lot of theories why that might be the case. Some parents are concerned about cultural bias in the assessment process. Others think that it has something to do with the severity of the symptoms of children of Somali descendants with ASD. There might be other theories or explanations why that is, but we just have to do a more research to learn a little bit more about and to understand. And the culture component is important. That's why Asli and I are doing this presentation. When we understand the culture, we can learn a little bit more. We want to make sure that that we're catching kids early, that we're identifying children, that there is not a one representation of ASD in the community. The ASD looks different every child. Those who have with dual diagnosis, those who don't have a dual diagnosis, it depends on where they are. So making sure that that information, that the culture component is understood is very important. It's also very important to understand community's point of view about intellectual disability, about disability, about ASD concern, and to understand that complexity is something that we're going to highlight today in our presentation. So I mentioned earlier that there were three main findings. The third finding is age of diagnosis. And we looked at that. And the overall age of diagnosis for kids is almost 5 years old. This is not specific to Somali children, as you can see in this slide. This is across the board in Minnesota. And so we are not identifying children. We're not diagnosing children early enough. And you've seen the slide that Ashley shared earlier about how early we can diagnose children nowadays. It doesn't have to be 5 years old. We can do better. We can diagnose children much younger. And again, it's something to keep in mind in providers is, how can we use this finding, what we learned from this study, whether it's about the prevalence, whether it's about the IQ, whether it's about the age of diagnosis, what can we learn from this? What can we learn from the CDC studies to promote early identification and to improve services that are needed for all children across the board? So now we're going to get into a little bit about the concerns in the Somali community. This is very important because, again, this kind of is part of the overall ASD and the Somali community. It's not just about the numbers. We want to share a little bit about what concerns are, what are some challenging factors, what are some takeaway tips. So I'd like to welcome back Asli, my co-presenter, to share some snippets about the concerns in the Somali community as it relates to autism. Asli, welcome back.
So let us look about the perception of autism. There is no Somali word for autism. When the word autism is brought up with any Somali person, that person first, you feel like they get shocked, they get frightened. And the first question they ask is, what is this disease and what causes it? Many Somalis say that they have never seen a person with autism back home. They also say there is no Somali person who doesn't talk or speak. When they notice speech delay, parents believe that the kid will eventually learn to communicate. It doesn't trigger a concern when a child has a speech delay. There is a huge stigma. In Somalia, someone is either sane or crazy. Where does autism belong? The community asks. Is this child mentally sick? That is the frequent question that we face in the community. When they notice that their child is not mentally sick, they then ask themselves, so what it is? So autism and mental illness have huge negative perceptions. These perceptions push families to hide their child and delay to seeking and using the services. Culturally, this community monitors the growth of the child, but not the development. They can tell when a baby sits, when a baby crawls, when a baby stands and walks, but not when a baby is supposed to smile at people, when a baby responds to sounds, when a baby bubbles and makes gestures. Parents lack the knowledge about the normal milestones and the early signs of autism. In the Somali context, disability has to have a physical sign. For example, someone we say is disabled when a person is blind or deaf. When we talk about autism, parents ask, my son has a normal look. Can you tell me what is the disability that you are talking about? Because the child doesn't have any physical sign that shows the parent this child has a developmental disability. Extended family members may advise to ignore the diagnosis, and they may suggest that the child will be better as he or she grows. Many families blame the assessment tools that we use to assess the development of the children. They say these tools are not appropriate, hence, these are false positives. Lack of vocabulary to describe and explain autism makes acceptance extremely challenging. These may also prevent them from sharing their concerns, leading to delays in assessment, diagnosis, and connection to services. Many Somalis are first generation. Some are not familiar with services available for children and adults with disabilities in schools and other systems. Many parents believe that disability comes as a will of Allah and should be considered as a blessing from Allah. Some people believe that disability of a child is a punishment from Allah. Others believe that disability is protection from Allah for the community. Again, another section of the community believe that the causes of disability include food. Like some mothers may say, if you feed your child with liver at early age, your child may not speak on time. Also, they believe that it is the evil eye or the evil word that causes autism. Assessment tools, when the findings of the Minneapolis prevalence study report came out, many community members raised concerns about the appropriateness of the assessment tools again. There were some parents who believed that these tools were not appropriate and have negatively affected the community. Other concerns we have heard is lack of diverse professionals in the field of autism, especially clinically and education services. These are some quotes from parents that we worked with. There is a parent who said, in our culture, you are either sane or you are crazy. There is no gray area. So are you telling me my son or my daughter is crazy when you tell me the child is diagnosed with autism? There is another parent who said, we are hiding because of the insult. We want to hide our children from that. This is due to the stigma that comes with autism and mental problems. And there are some parents who are also isolating their children. You will see parents busy stopping their children to interact with other children in public places. Some of these parents' children are not diagnosed and they do not want people to know about the problems that their kids have. Now, Anab will tell us about working with Somali families.
Thank you, Asli. So whether you're working with Somali parents or families as an educator, as a clinician, as a researcher, you're coming in with a lot of those cultural concerns that Asli talked about. Keep those in mind because those are really important and they help explain some of the challenges and some of the concerns that you might encounter as you're working with Somali communities and some of the documented information that has been shared with us when we had focus group discussions and conversations with both providers and parents in how they feel about autism, their understanding of developmental disability, and the complexity of the language in terms of labeling. If a child has speech delay and it is labeled under developmental disability, that might create confusion for parents to understand if their understanding of developmental disability does not include speech delay or language delay. So keeping those things in mind, let's now talk a little bit about challenges that parents with children with autism might encounter. It's not meant to be an exhaustive list, but we wanted to highlight several of them, starting with understanding about autism, navigating complex system, language, transportation, stigma, stress, housing, and family size. I have had throughout the years, I've been working with the university for almost 5 years full time, 6 years including part time. And I have worked with Somali families in the school system and in nonprofit capacity, many years in addressing disability. And some of these things that I'm listing come up even if you're doing health education, even if you're doing diabetic education, making sure that community understands the subject, understands how to navigate the system, that you address the language complexity and some of the underlying social economic scenarios. So I don't mean this to be a new challenge is introduced to you. But what does that mean in the context of autism? What does that mean as a provider, as a researcher? So just to share a little bit about my experience is that I have had the opportunity to meet with Somali parents with children with autism, to be on live TV, to co-present with other parents and other researchers in the subject of autism, to present the findings, and to share parents about some developmental milestone messages. One thing I can tell you is that parents and community members want to know more about autism. Autism in the Somali community is something that people always want to know more about. They want to know more in depth about the child development. They want to have more opportunity to advance their advocacy knowledge and skills. They want to understand a little bit more about developmental delay. And they also want information to come to them in a culturally appropriate messengers. That really matters. Making sure that parents can relate to it and are receptive to the information that's being shared, and that their concerns are being addressed, that they have been heard and they've been listened to. Also, I want to add that parents and community members want to know the cause. They want to know what causes autism. Where did it come from? Why does it impact the Somali community? Why does it impact other community? That's something that's always going to come up when you do autism education. Another challenge is that navigating the system. Whether a child might be seen as a well checkup, visit from the clinic to the clinic, or coming in to be screened at school preschool, we know that there is going to be a challenges in navigating systems and trying to understand how to connect and appropriate resources to the families. Why does that matter? It matters because a lot of critical time is wasted or get missed out from the time a parent might learn their child has a developmental concerns or a delay to the time that they're connected to resources. That's critical because we know early intervention is important in from educators or from a clinical point of view. So we want to make sure that a lot of, but we also know a lot of the next step depends on parents signing off those services, parents coming back to those appointments, parents finding appropriate information once they heard those concerns. Um, in my experience, in even talking to parents who are not Somalis and doing key informed interview to understand their experience in accessing to autism services, and talking to parents who are educated, who are English speakers, you can almost hear the frustration in their voices when they're on the phone. They're almost all of them across the board have experiences that are not positive. And so when you add that to culture and stigma and language barrier and all of that, it just makes things even a little bit more complicated. And many of us are immigrants here in America, and some of them are having their children first time. Some kids might be raised by their grandparents, and so it's the language is addressing the language is important. And also, kids of Somali descendants may be exposed to both Somali and English and maybe not adequately exposed to either language. So some of that language delay can add other complexity. And then trying to find words to describe behavior, social communications, triggers. That's going to add more issues into the mix of addressing of challenges that language presents in the context of autism. We have heard also issues around housing, and families losing their homes because of the challenging behavior that are associated with children who may have challenging behavior. And if there are many Somali families rent homes and apartments, that's going to put the families in a vulnerable situation when they lose their homes, place of residence. So something to keep in mind is how that might factor in, especially if the child is not yet diagnosed. So I have heard stories where children were actually diagnosed upon the child running away from home, and many and other sectors getting involved, like child protection and police being called and all of that, and run away. And so that can be a very traumatic experience for all people who are involved. But I have heard situations where that has actually led the child, finally families getting the service, recognizing that their child might have a need and they need to be connected to services. And so that's some things to this is just, again, it's not meant to be exhausted, but those are things that we have heard again and again about challenges, stigma, stress. Stress is parents, which a lot of studies have documented, parents who have children with autism are highly stressed, very, very stressful. Situation for both moms and dads. And then one other thing is that a lot of times the community setting, even if you're going to the mall, even if you want to go to the park, those are not designed for children who have sensory needs, children who need to be monitored or to have a supportive services while they're playing with other kids, so that they can have also some outing and some experience being outside and being with other kids. Our community structure is not built that way. So a lot of times children are being kept at home. That way they're safe. But that we know that creates isolation for the parents, and it creates isolation for children, and it increases the stigma. So keeping that in mind, I'm going to turn it over things to Asli to talk a little bit about Somali culture. Asli.
So, if we want to talk about Somali culture, I think it will take more than the 1 hour that we have for this webinar. But let me just take you through the key points that you need to understand in order to do your job well with the Somali families. Majority of Somalis, as you all know, are Muslims. So they pray 5 times a day, and this may affect appointment times. As you make appointments with the families, the 5 times of the prayer times are to be considered. Religion is used to treat illnesses. You have also to know that we use a reading of the Quran on the sick and praying for the sick as a way to treat illnesses, particularly illnesses that are complex or not well known, like autism. You will see many parents opting for that. I also would like you to know that shaking hands is prohibited between the opposite sex except family members. I'm just telling you this because I know it is a courtesy when your client enters, we like to shake hands. So in the Somali culture, that is not welcomed. But I would like you also to note that some Somalis may be open to handshaking with opposite sex. So what I would like to suggest to the providers is that you do not initiate the handshake with a parent whom you are serving. But if the parent initiates it, you accept and you shake hands with. Another key point is privacy and modesty are very important in the Somali context or culture. Somalis prefer same-sex providers. Also, they prefer even same-sex interpreters if possible, because they don't feel shy to say things they want to say to interpreters if they are of the same sex. I would like you to know that family is the center of the Somali society, as it is with every society, but we are more about the extended family members. You will see a role here with extended family members who could be either in the US or other parts of the world. Grandparents who are in Somalia or outside of US may participate in the decisions regarding a child with autism or with any other problem. We communicate with our uh, elders if they are even outside the country, and they really help in the decision making. Somalis, as you already know, because I know majority of you work with the Somali families, we are oral. So stories fly very fast in this community, including misinformation. So we have always to be able to provide the facts and evidence-based information. We would like that to fly rather than the misinformation. Men are breadwinners in our culture, and women take care of the family and children's affairs. However, nowadays we see more women in the workforce, and we are seeing more house dads as well. The man is the head of the family. Decision making is a shared responsibility in our culture and also in our religion. Men influence decisions that involve complex issues. So when you are dealing with a mom and you find that the mom is resistant to a recommended care, it's always good to invite the father too, because it is easier for decisions to be made by both of them being together. Elders are respected and they play a key role in family decisions. So working with families of children living with autism, if we continue, we have to invest in cultural brokers, delegates, or navigators. Hiring a multi-purpose Somali staff, I call it multi-purpose, who can be a cultural broker at one time, a system navigator at another time, and an interpreter at another time. This person is to be someone who is respected by the community and has experience in working with families of young children. The families need someone with whom they can relate with and with whom they can share their concerns and questions with. Availing such a Somali support staff can enhance the family's understanding of the process of assessment, diagnosis, and engaging them with the existing services. Organizing or having experienced parents of kids with autism to form a support group that can provide the families with newly diagnosed children with autism supportive and guidance can give hope to these families. Family members who understand autism, who have utilized the available services, and who can share their success stories with these new families are invaluable assets. Increasing autism awareness in the Somali community could be delivered by community members via a range of community channels to reach all the families and the wider community. Community-based organizations such as mosques can play a key role in engaging and supporting parents of kids with autism. Somalis consult with the faith leaders whenever a family or an individual faces any problem, including health issues. For some families, the mosque is the first place they go for consultation. Another key community and members that we need to engage and partner with are interpreters. Interpreters are highly respected since they assist the families with communication. Families consult with the interpreters when they cannot make a decision. That consultation may occur outside the professional venue, such as in the community. So interpreters are key in guiding the community, and using them effectively will enhance the process of getting these families connected to services. Now I welcome Anab to help us with or continue with how to work with families having children with autism.
Thank you, Asli. As Asli has shared with you some critical strategies and advices in terms of working with Somali families and children, I want you to know that Asli and I have used all these strategies. We have a practical experience. We have been part of these strategies. We've done projects that utilize many of these strategies, and we will not be recommending them if we didn't have experience and live experience as well as work experience in the recommendations that we're sharing with you here today. So along the lines of cultural delegations, community advocates, partnering with faith, mosque, interpreters, and community media, I want to highlight a couple of more of strategies, and that is the value in strengthening provider and parent relationship. When parents trust their provider, that they're able to and they feel they've been heard and they've been understood, that they will likely to have an ongoing relationship with that provider. They will understand that, and that provider will have a more historical perspective of the child's development, of the family concerns, instead of being in multiple clinics or having to be rerouted into multiple places. We know from experience that Somali parents value and trust providers and have a high regard for medical as well as educators as well as many other providers. But the caveat of that is that they don't want to be judged. They want to feel comfortable and they want to know that they're being valued as much as they value the information that you share with them. So keep those importance of those relationships in mind. We know from experience that parents who have good relationship with their providers not only keep coming back, but they recruit other parents. They're willing to travel the long distance. They're willing to bring in friends along and commute because they value that relationship. So that's very important. And it's very important also as you're building trust with those families as a provider to share factual medical information. Sometimes we go around information. We don't come directly. We don't express the urgency or the importance of what the next steps is. And so making sure that people understand that there's a follow up. If you don't have time, if you have an appointment is limited, making sure that they actually understand what the next step is, what those findings mean, what those diagnoses mean, what those the reality or the limitations of what you're providing if you're unable to address all their concerns. Make sure that they have the factual medical information. We want to make sure the importance of decision making. I think Ashley alluded to that. You might be have a situations as a provider, as an educator, or anyone else with us listening to this webinar, is that you might have conversation with a mom. A lot of times our moms are very active in their children's health cares, and they might be the ones who are bringing them to the medical appointment or to the school or anywhere. And then you discuss something, and then they come back and they said, I'm reconsidering what you told me. I don't think I'm going to move along with what you suggested. That's because it's a shared family decision. Extended family members have a role. The dad has a role. So if families have to make a team decision, just like we make team evaluations in many of these cases, families are making a team decision, and the input of the elderly and their husbands matters a lot. And their information is coming to them, multiple sources who are on the same page is also important to them. I want to highlight also the importance of interpreters. Ashley talked about that importance. Interpreters are important, but there are a couple of things to keep in mind. That interpreters are competent, that you follow the guidelines and the strategies, that in the context of interpreters who are competent, what do we mean by that? That they understand the terminology of disability. They understand the terminology of ASD. They understand the scope of the time that they're needed. And it's hard sometimes because they have appointments all over the country and they're moving along. But making sure that if you don't have a cultural navigator, if you don't have a community person working with your clinic, and have that consistency that are doing interpreting and education, and you are in a situation where you rely on interpreter, it takes just a few extra steps to make sure that the interpreters understand confidentiality, understand the language, are competent, and know what they're doing. Scheduling, we know sometimes these evaluations take months to set up. We have clinicians who you have to wait for months to get into their schedule. You have to fill out forms to send out sometimes. You don't want families to, in the daily grinds of things that they're going through in their daily lives, forget this important, or the appointment gets misplaced. So few reminder calls a week leading to the appointment, making sure that families have, make sure that they have transportation, just checking into, you have a childcare with your other kids, you have transportation. Will you be there? Will the interpreter be there? Will the family be there? Those little things go a long way in making sure that we have strategies in working with Somali families. So we wanted to now go over a little bit about some key messages and to take home key messages. I'm going to invite Ashley back to go over the first 5 key messages.
I think that already Anna did the development of the trusting relationship with the providers. That's very key and very important. And it is also important that you know that autism is feared. Every family who has a kid diagnosed or is being diagnosed with developmental disability is really has a very, very huge fear. Also, I would like you to know that parents need factual information. Some of them were misinformed. So they need to understand the normal child development. They need to understand what is ASD and what are its early signs. They need to understand what services are available. They need to understand how these services will help their child, why early intervention is important. We tend to just assign parents to services without explaining to them how helpful these services are. Also, we need messages to come from trusted and culturally appropriate messengers. They want to hear the information from trusted community resources. So that's where the cultural brokers or navigators or interpreters come in. Working with the family is more efficient than working with one individual or one parent alone in this situation. For example, bringing both parents, and sometimes even if the grandparents live with the family, I would invite them also to be in this discussion, because when decisions are made jointly, they are more solid. I would like to give you some cultural tips, like multiple appointments is a new concept, and it is really challenging to all of us, including us who are educated. So you can increase the attendance of an appointment by a Somali parent by avoiding appointments at the prayer times. As I have told you, there are 5 prayer times. And when you are making an appointment with a parent may not think about prayer times. They may just take any time that you give. But as the time comes for the appointment and they find themselves, wow, I have to pray and then go, then that's the time when they miss the important appointment that they have with you. Also, avoid scheduling an appointment earlier than 10 a.m. And why is that? Because, as Anna rightly said, these people have lots of challenges, including transportation challenges, and they have other children demanding their attention. So 10 o'clock, I feel like it is too early for a Somali parent to come for an appointment. I now invite Anna to take us to the next 5 take-home points.
Thank you, Ashley. I want to mention a couple of more take-home messages. One is tapping into parent support groups and creating opportunities to engage your education and outreach with parents and building support system for them. I know here in Minnesota, there have been Somali parents who met regularly And we have been to that support group many times. We've shared the findings of our study with them. We've had we supported events that they sponsor. We've hired them as part of our delegates and a part of our community facilitators. I cannot tell you when you're addressing something like autism that has so much stigma, and you have a parent who is bravely sharing their story, whether it's in person or an informal group or on phone calls where their community has community calls or on television. And I've had opportunity to be with parents in any of those capacity, that the information just resonates with the community a little bit more. And they're just part of the tapestry of resources that are out there that that are at your capacity to work with and to leverage the parent support along with community groups, along community professionals, along with clinicians. It's going to take a teamwork to address the concerns of the families. It's also a holistic approach. Many times when you're working with Somali families, it's if there are other challenges going on in their life, um, and they don't have support in those challenges, jobs, many other things, housing, how are they going to be able to meet some of the requirements or stay engaged in some of the occupational therapy sessions, the speech delay, the speech therapies, the school, the all the attention and things that they need to do with their children. And so just knowing that if there are opportunities to address holistic approach in working with families and help them, maybe connect them with social worker if they're struggling with other services, or connect them with the mosque if there are services available, or with other support groups, that would really go a long way. And I wanted to also talk about, making sure that you looked into your policies and reflect them. How culturally sensitive are your outreach strategies, and how culturally sensitive are your existing policies and procedures? Sometimes we have policies and procedures that are in existence that are inhibiting our efforts, and looking at those and looking closely and making sure that those are coming from a place of cultural competency would also go a long way. So I think that we have touched on, again, some key messages, some key challenges. So we want to leave you with some resources that are within reach that we picked for you in the capacity of this webinar. The first webpage is a website that has the previous Somali Minneapolis Somali ASD project. You'll find the non-technical community report, a fact sheet, couple of podcasts that we did with our land fellows and our community facilitators. And you will also find the second web page is about our Minnesota Help Me Grow. There are really great translated resources and educational resources. Following that is our state website, Minnesota Department of Health website, the page that has in autism. There you will find some of translated documents, along with another study that we didn't talk about, that was about a qualitative study looking at how well we're serving with different communities, and that includes Somali and Hmong and Latino community as well. And so you can find a copy of that report as well, and some of the ongoing work that the department is doing. We have a LEN website there. LEN is a really great resource as well. Check it out when you get a chance. Our Learn the Sign website has some good, helpful resources as well. As also, we listed the CDC website and our ADDM project website. Again, for future webinars, we hope to sponsor more webinars in the coming months. Please check out ADDM website. That's where they will be posted. And we want to leave you with some reading research that has been done in ASD and in the Somali community. I've only picked a couple of them. There are more if you Google them. But here's some latest findings of some that actually came out in 2015 and 2017 that are also out in the universe. And Ashley and I also have our contact information here. where you can reach me and also where you can reach Asli as we continue doing this work in addressing the building awareness around autism, also building the capacity of providers so that you have some tools and some resources to add into your existing toolkit and help support Somali families wherever you are in Minnesota and outside of Minnesota. We want to thank you for being part of this, watching this film or watching the film version or joining the webinar. This is going to be accessible on YouTube, and we hope you can share with many other people who couldn't be on the webinar. Thank you very much.